Hello, welcome back to Asian Cinema Season 2017. Today marks the beginning of an interesting development in Asian Cinema Season. Something I hadn't planned, but I love how these things have kind of cropped up and just sprouted out of an inspiration point when I've watched a film and it's took me down a different path than I was expecting, than I planned. And I kind of was open to the idea of doing this, where I hadn't set every single video down for Asian Cinema Season, and I kind of, was open to the idea of maybe expanding it in different areas if I felt the urge to, and it took me in a different direction, which is exactly what happened a couple of days ago. So, to cut a long story medium, knowing me, before I get to the film I'm going to be talking about in this video, which honestly I don't have too much to say about, so I can probably go into the setup of the next few videos right here at the beginning of this one. So a couple of months ago, when I was planning this whole thing, I was looking through the 1001 Movies You Must See Before You Die book to find some films from Asia to review. And I wanted to push myself beyond just Japan and China and Korea, and to look at different countries from the continent of Asia, like India. We did a lot of Satyajit Ray films earlier on in the month. But also Iran, that was a country that kept coming up. And one of the films that I read the synopsis of and was very interested in was Close Up, a film by Abbas Kiarostami, an Iranian filmmaker, obviously. So I pegged that instantly as one to watch and to review as part of this Asian Cinema Season. So I found it on Filmstruck, the Criterion-partnered streaming service I've talked about a lot now at this point, and has really been a godsend for this whole Asian Cinema Season. It's just such a fantastic service, and I love how it's, again, just had these films that have cropped up and have become part of this whole thing without me really planning it. And the same thing happened here. I watched Close Up a couple of days ago, loved it, and looked at the other films that Filmstruck had from Kiarostami. Then I looked in the book and realized there were 3 films from Kiarostami featured in the book, so I thought, why not watch all 3 of them? And then I noticed in the special features section for Close Up, there was his first feature film, and I believe that is included on the Close Up Blu-ray as well. So I thought, why not watch that as well? So that's exactly what I just did. I'm going to talk to you about it now. So Abbas Kiarostami is an Iranian filmmaker, very famous and celebrated Iranian filmmaker. I certainly hadn't heard that much about him before, and in fact, a couple of weeks ago, I talked about Willow and Wind, which I thought was a fantastic film, one of my favorites that I've watched for this whole season, and that was written by Abbas Kiarostami. So that's kind of cool, now that I've seen a couple of his films. Anyway, The Traveller feels different from the other films I've seen from him because it's one of his first films. He did films before this, but he considers The Traveller to be his first real feature-length film. It's about an hour and 15 minutes. It's a fairly short one. It's in black and white, but it still seems to hold the values that I've seen in his later films from the 90s. This is from 1974, if I hadn't mentioned that already. And it's a very simple film. It's about this young boy who loves football. That's all he cares about. He plays football with his friends. They have their own little team. They play in the streets with these small little football nets that they've all pooled money together to buy and stuff. He goes to school. He's thinking of football. He's got a magazine under the desk. He's thinking about football. His parents chastising him, or his mother, I should say, chastising him. His father seems very just placid and just, sedentary. He's just there, and apparently we don't see this on screen, but he's there to kind of just beat up his son, basically, to give him the whip, give him a good hiding after hours. But the mother is the one who's really on her son about study, do something with your life, try and learn a trade or whatever. Someone else says that to him actually, but the parent is trying to mold the son into a better person, but the son just wants to play football and think about football and go to a football match. And that's the core of the film, is there's this football match in a couple of days in Tehran, I believe was the city, but either way it's a city that is, no it's not actually, or is it? I'm not sure. Again, I've seen a few of these Iranian films now, so the city names are probably flying around in my head, but either way, it's a city that he needs to go to where he needs to take a long bus ride to get to. Let's just say he lives in kind of a small town. He needs to get to the big city. That's all you really need to know in terms of the geography of it, I suppose. And that costs money. So, he steals some money from his mum and gets into trouble at school. And that scene almost made me cry because she comes into the school and she says to the principal, she's like, what's going on with my son? I've come here to see how he's doing in school. And the principal's like, are you, paraphrasing, are you fucking kidding me? This kid is a monster. He's made life for us teachers a living hell. And you want to come here and ask how he's doing? It's all down to you. you know, the source starts with the parent, and he proper lays into this woman, and she doesn't really have much to say in argument against him, and she tries to kind of make a point about how she's constantly cooking and cleaning and trying to, you know, look after her family, and there's not much more she can do beyond that, especially because she's illiterate and can't read, and she can't check that her son has done his homework. And he calls the boy in and says, "Your mother says that you stole money from her." And he's like, "No, I haven't," you know, and he starts pulling his hand out and hitting his hand with a wooden stick. And the kid starts crying. And holy shit, it was so realistic. Now, he is getting his hand hit for real, but, you know, kids are tough, you know, and he wasn't getting proper, you know, thwacked with it, but he was getting hit with it nonetheless. But his reaction certainly made me feel like the kid who played the main character in this film had either been through that or was still going through that, because it's that kind of guttural kind of crying, and it got me so much. And again, I don't know if it's, you know, great acting or whether it's just he tapped into something that was very much a part of him already. I don't know, but it was a pretty heavy scene, and it really got to me, and it really made me sympathetic for him, even though throughout the film he basically does a lot of unsympathetic things. This kid is obsessed with football. He's obsessed with getting to this match at any costs. You know, he wants to get the bus, go to the football match, see the football match, and beyond that, it just doesn't matter. You know, that's the end game. Get to the football game, you know, and experience this thing that he wants to be a part of. You know, football is his life, and he's obsessed with it. Now, the reason I really wanted to watch this film is because the main character, or the main subject of Close Up, the film I'll be talking about tomorrow, from Abbas Kiarostami, he is a cinephile. He loves movies, and he talks about the film The Traveller when he's on trial, and he says he feels like the kid who was left behind in the film, and he talks about it. So I was intrigued to see it on that aspect, and that was a guy who was just so obsessed with films that it kind of ruined his life. And this is about a boy who's so obsessed with football, it's ruining you know, his potential in life. You know, he's throwing everything to one side and just solely focusing on that thing he loves. And I think anyone can kind of relate to that. Not that they had followed that path, but that they could conceivably see themselves following that path. We all have something that we love, right? We all have that passion. We all have that one thing that drives us, that we love to kind of engage in, whether it's watching films, playing video games, reading books, listening to music, playing music, painting, you know, or anything else. You know, there's so many different hobbies out there. Bird watching, stamp collecting, I don't know. Not to say that some of those hobbies would drive you to the extremes that the boy in this film does. But it's an interesting kind of look at a kid who's just obsessed with... There's a great sequence where he's trying to do anything he can to make some money, and his friend, who is kind of a really endearing character because he's there to help out his mate, but he's not the same as him, you know. But he's doing the best he can, but he has a bit more of a moral compass than the main character. And he says, okay, well, here's my uncle's camera from storage. You can take it and sell it to go see a football match. And that's another part of the story, is that it's not about these two friends going to see the football match. It's about this kid going to see the football match. And that's how the character, or the actual man in Close Up, is talking about how he felt like he was the kid who was left behind. He didn't get to be a part of it, basically. The person who's left out. And the main character, he takes this camera, which is kind of broken, and decides he's going to kind of scam people on the street by pretending to take their picture and charge them like a few pennies or whatever, and then the next day he'll say, oh yeah, the pictures didn't come out very well, you moved or whatever. So he's got no role in the film, but he's playing the part. He's like really squinting and stuff and clicking the camera. Yeah, great. And it's this wonderful little sequence where you see these wide-eyed kids kind of really excited, just standing in front of a wall having their picture taken. It's really just, you know, these close-up images of all these bright and, again, innocent faces. But in the sidelines you see the main character's friend, who's getting increasingly concerned about it, increasingly guilty about it, you know. And there's even a point where, you know, he's taking the pictures of all these young kids who are giving him pennies, and then this mother and a child come to have their picture taken, and the main character's friend is like, oh no, don't take the money, don't take it from them, you know. But he takes it. So I love that we had that friend there to be kind of, again, the moral compass of the film as far as the child characters were concerned. But we then follow the main character on his journey to go see the football match, and it's as infuriating as it is exciting. You know, the kids, he gives such a spirited performance. It's reminded me of the 400 Blows in some instances. It reminded me a tiny bit of Bicycle Thieves in some cases, in terms of that kind of the neo-realism. you know, really just capturing that kind of life on the streets and stuff. Well, not on the streets, but like, you know, these just, yeah, it really captures an essence of a way of life in a country like that, in a time period like that. And then you see him kind of go into a bigger, you know, kind of brighter world where there's a lot more adults around, and there's you know, there's a bit more of a fever pitch going on in terms of this big game happening and stuff. And I think my favorite scene, or at least one of my favorite scenes, because I think the photograph taking scene might be my favorite, but I think maybe the best scene of the film is when he gets to the football stadium at the end of the film, and he's looking around, and there's a swimming pool, and there's loads of kids in there swimming and having fun, and he's on the outside, he's looking in, and there's this boy there, and he's trying to talk to him, he's trying to ask him how deep is the swimming pool, but the boy on the other side of the glass can't hear him, and then eventually just turns around and leaves him hanging. And it's kind of like this perfect kind of symbol for where he is in not just his life, but kind of the social standing he has back home in a smaller village. You know, he's on the outside of where most normal kids are. He doesn't have the privileges that most normal kids have, and that scene perfectly sums it up in this small beat that feels natural, but it kind of shows you that visual of him being literally locked behind an invisible wall from other people. And that kind of goes into maybe his inability to connect with other kids as well, because he's gone down this road of obsession too far. So I thought that was a wonderful little scene in the film. You know, it leads towards a hell of a striking finale, I thought, and again, infuriating at times. You know, I won't go into the ending of the film, but I thought it was very well done. And I thought for a feature debut, it was fantastic. I love the way the camera observes in the film. I love the kind of close-ups on this main character. You know, it's just like a little scene when they have a football match and his side loses, and we're kind of zooming in close up on his face, and there's other people running in front of the camera, but we're just looking at him looking like, you know, crestfallen and stuff, and someone comes up to him like, well, why didn't you win? He's like, well, it's not my fault, you know. He just kind of spits on it, you know. It felt raw, it felt real, you know, fly on the wall kind of stuff, and it seemed to capture a realism that was really helpful to draw me into the story, I thought. So The Traveller, I thought, was great, and a really good opening gambit from, you know, what little I've seen of now, but seems to be the career of a great filmmaker. Usually when I would go back to see a first film of a director, it's someone who I've seen a lot from before. I guess not in the case of Satyajit Ray, because the first film I watched of him was his first ever film, but for the most part, you know, like a Kurosawa or a Hitchcock, you know, you see all the greatest hits before you go back to the beginning and see their kind of more humble beginnings, I guess. But here with Abbas Kiarostami, The Traveller is a worthy film. I just thought it was really good. I'd definitely watch it again. I just it captured kind of the obsessive nature of kids at times in childhood, and also you know, the hopefulness of them, where it's like, you know, that you just focused, again, tunnel vision, you're just focused on this one thing, where, you know, I don't care what it takes, I just want to get to that thing, you know, which for me at the time would have been something like maybe when I was a kid going to a wrestling event or something, but there weren't any near me, you know, but I could see myself getting as obsessed over it, but I definitely wouldn't have done the things that the main character did to get there. So it's kind of almost like a, not even a wish fulfillment, but kind of what could have happened if when you were a kid you chased your dream to the extreme of, you know, just, you know, pawning stuff that you shouldn't have pawned and stealing money that you shouldn't have stolen, that kind of thing. So it's almost like an alternate kind of, you know, playing out of your own kind of childhood, like what you would have done if you followed that path. Anyway, I've rambled on enough. I thought I'd be quite short about this film, but I really did think it was great. So there we go. Stay tuned for tomorrow's review, which will be part of the Epic Film Challenge 2. 1,000 movies you must see before you die, while I'll be reviewing his 1990 film, which is jumping ahead about, you know, 15 years in his career, Close Up, which I have a lot to say about as well. And over the next 4 days, I'll be talking about 5 films in total. One which isn't a Kiarostami film, but is linked very closely to him. So look forward to that. If you've seen any of Kiarostami's films, leave your comments down below. I'd love to hear them. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
It's alright by me. Apart from the fact he throws cans of Carlin into a tree. Yeah, he's really cool. Yeah, he's really cool. But he's not quite as cool as you, 'cause